Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. So my first day on the job at Central Arizona College, I was onboarding with somebody from Human Resources, and he's a very nice guy. I hate to even talk about this, but I can't get over it. He's a very nice guy. Let me start with that. But as I was onboarding with him, he was drinking a tea and a gulping noise, and it really bugged the hell out of me. And now my job is forever tainted by that one experience. But when I think about it, somebody proved me wrong. But the job description over at CAC, nowhere in there does it say the ability to listen to loud slurping noises, right? Prove me wrong. It's hard to say because job descriptions have so many fine prints these days. But that wasn't the only problem I ran into. A couple of weeks ago, I had a student who had suffered a death in the family, and I would have took it at that. But he went on to describe in gory detail what his grandmother looked like before she had died. And I'm standing there trying to tune that out because I can't think about it. See, the ability to listen to one of your students talk about sensitive matters, yeah, that might actually be on the description. I have to think about it. There's so much fine print in job descriptions nowadays that it's hard to tell if that's. I'd be more inclined to believe that second one is on the description than that first one, right? Listening to loud eating and drinking noises. The other thing about eating and drinking that bothers me is that I sometimes like to do intermittent fasting for 20 some hours sometimes. And when I'm in an office environment and other people are eating and making noises with eating, sometimes it challenges me with the intermittent fasting. And so the interruption of your healthy eating goals, the ability to take interruption to your healthy eating goals is probably not on your job description anywhere, right? I don't know. It's hard to say. How about 6 years ago, long before the concept of stay home when you were sick was as popular as it is now, I think the popularity is kind of waning as well. I was working at a tutoring center. I had a student who came in very sick, and so he was making mucus noises up and down his throat, and it grossed me out. It grossed me out. I almost wanted to vomit. Actually, I excused myself, and I stepped out of the room for a second. I went, and I don't know if he heard me, but that's how grossed out I was. And after the class, he went to the bathroom and vomited himself, I think. And at the same time, I got to be thankful that the student is so dedicated, he's willing to come in sick, right? A lot of students will find any excuse to not come, right? And he's coming sick. And I think nowadays it would be it would be more acceptable to ask him to leave if he's coming in sick like that, right? After what we went through these last few years. But this was in 2018, so the ability to deal with sick colleagues, actually that might be on the fine print nowadays, right? We're not responsible if you catch COVID-19 at your job. I would imagine that somewhere that might be part of this description nowadays, right? Anyways, the point is that even at a dream job, right, which CAC is probably one of the most beautiful jobs that I've had in my career, I still have to deal with a lot of things that are not on my job description. That's kind of unfortunate, right? If I could do only the things that are on my description, I'd be a very happy person on the job. I really would. I really would. Maybe it's one of those things where I have to be a little bit more standing of my ground, right? When my colleague is making eating noises, excuse myself for somehow, right? I wish it were more popular to say that these noises kind of bother me. I'm going to step out, right? Nothing to do with them, obviously. I wish it were more popular to say, I'm in the middle of a fast. Watching and hearing somebody eat is just kind of bothersome to me. Can we find somewhere else to eat, or can I go somewhere else? I wish it were more popular to do that, right? I wish it were more popular to be mindful of our health, right, with our intermittent fasting, right? It kind of I'm really disappointed that the events of 4 years ago didn't cause us to permanently be more mindful of our health. Right now, people are rolling back now, right? I wish it were more popular to say no, right? So one of the big problems that I have to deal with this week, I don't mind helping my colleagues when they need it. The problem I have with saying yes is that I want it to be an independent event. I don't want people to assume yes for an answer after the first time I say it. I was working at a tutoring center, and one of my colleagues had called me last minute, actually. He wasn't able to tutor this calculus subject. And so he has the audacity of calling me at 1:05. He has a student from 1 to 2 p.m. and he calls me at 1:05, expecting me to fly to the center somehow. Somehow I flew to the center, right? And after I had worked with the student really loved what I was doing, which is great. Except that my boss didn't clear it with me. He just scheduled me for that student from then on. And what was really frustrating, the student was only available from 1 to 2, and my other work doesn't begin until 3. The tutoring center is in a weird part of town. There's nothing around there for me to hang out in. So it's just a huge waste of my time. Now, why didn't I tell the boss that this schedule doesn't work for me? I could. Except that at the time, that was my only job, and I kind of needed it. I didn't want to rock the boat, right? And I think he knew that and took advantage of the situation. And what was really interesting is a lot of times I get along with the students a lot better than I do with the boss. The student was 17 years old, and I asked him, can I ask you something? Don't tell our boss, but this time kind of I like working with you, first of all, but could the time be a little bit better because my other work doesn't begin until 3? And he said that the reason he had to leave at 2 was because he had just started his first job. Now he's 17 years old. I'm supposed to be happy for him that he's starting his first job, but at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, I gotta waste my time so that you could go work at your first job, and so he was making almost as much as I do, and now I got to waste 1 hour. And so it's just really upsetting, all because I decided to say yes that first time. What did I learn from that? I learned to even when somebody asked me to do something that I love to do, to always say no. And so that's become a very sore subject for me. I want to be saying yes more. I just don't want my yes to stick around, right? And the ability to say yes without it sticking around was never part of any job description I ever took, right? And that's something I have to deal with. I my first week at CAC, I was asked to fill in for this one colleague, and learning from my lesson 2 years ago at that tutoring center, I said no. But at the same time, I was asking for somebody else to fill in for me so that I could see the solar eclipse of next week. I felt really terrible about that. But I didn't want to invite the trouble that I ran into 2 years ago at the tutoring center all over again, right? It's just a bad experience. Although nowadays, if that happens again here at CAC, I have much more leverage to, hey, I didn't agree to any of this stuff, right? At the time, I didn't have the ability to do that because that was my only job, and I often felt like, my boss, he's very smart. He's 75 years old, and he has a lot of wisdom under his belt, and he has the ability to make minor mistakes seem like, oh my God, you better tip the line or else you're going to get fired, right? And a lot of times, he magnified every little detail that went wrong, and made it seem like I couldn't speak up for myself. What was really interesting was that part of the reason I left that job was that as soon as you guys remember in 2023 when my art career started to take off, as soon as I started to develop much more leverage with my art career, he changed his tune quite a bit, and that toxicity his toxicity really oozed out. He couldn't hide it. And long story short, I picked up on that. And that's around the time when I left that job. I landed the job at Phoenix College as well. As soon as he heard about the college and my art project, his tune really changed. And that's when it's the two lessons I learned from that job. One, Nancy Reagan's "Just Say No," right? That was not quite the right lesson to learn, but that's kind of what patched me over these last 2 years. And number two, you got to have multiple sources of income. When you do, the attitudes really shift. And I think that's really toxic that people take that into account. I really do. The job description might as well say that, right? You need a second job, or else we're going to walk all over you, right? That I guarantee that's not written anywhere in the job description, right? Anyways, it just goes to show that everybody's job entails a lot more than what's on their job descriptions, right? I was just joking with one of my students the other day. He was talking about the upcoming election and how one candidate blamed another candidate over something. I won't say the names here. And we joked that one of the requirements of becoming the president of the United States is your ability to blame former presidents for all the wrongs that happened during your term, right? This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.